Appreciate you being here today and some short notice, but I thought it was important that we get out a message to our community as a whole, right? All those that here in Newport News. I wish it was under better circumstances, but we do have some new information to put out to the media and most importantly to our community and our youth. Back of the room today, our Young Adult Police Commissioner program, which is representatives from each high school, they're joining us. Matter of fact, we were just having our Christmas lunch before the school break, and they work with us, and we talk a lot about issues in our community, issues that affect them and their youth and things that they see. That's important. We learn a lot from them. They help us bridge the gap between youth and law enforcement, and we were fortunate to have them. I learn as much from them as they do, hopefully a little bit from me. The things that happened in our city last night affect them, and I did share with them, and we had a really good conversation, and I want them to know I love them. They matter to me. So I just wanted to share a little bit of update with you. I did talk to our mayor, our city manager, councilman. I've talked to Howard Gwynn this morning. I got a short brief last night. Some of our detectives are in the back of the room that have not gone home, that have been here through the night. And then the phone call was made to our victim's family. We talked with his father this morning. Out of respect, I wanted to make sure that we had conveyed to him what I'm going to share with you. I also had a conversation with Dr. Parker and Rashad Wright. They were with us last night at Minchville, and they played a vital role as we got together and talked about our messaging and steps that we wanted to go over and put in place. And there will be ongoing conversations. So again, we're not even 24 hours into the homicide that occurred last night in the parking lot there at Minchville High School. So just a little bit of information. I will try to take some questions. I appreciate the leadership in our city for waking them up in the middle of the night and being able to have conversations with them. Dr. Parker and Rashad, like I said, we were one of the last few to leave the school as the crime scene and the forensics did their processing and finishing up their interviews. So last night there was a basketball game between two of our great schools, Woodside High School and Minchville. As the game let out, there was a good-sized crowd there. Individuals went into the parking lot. Now, apparently there were two individuals that we know of that had some words going back and forth, some gestures back and forth inside during the basketball game. There is video footage of some of those things. As one individual goes outside, he gets into goes to his vehicle, or beside his vehicle, there is an altercation there, and a shot rings out. There's a shot fired. Now, we had several officers working the basketball game along with school security, and in fact, while I was at the city council meeting, Chief Grinstead was at the Minchville basketball game, and he saw the size of the crowd there, and he called for some more officers. It looked like, I think there was also a band concert, an orchestra concert celebrating the season, so there was a lot of people in the parking lot, and he wanted to make sure there was a good traffic plan to get individuals out. So a shot rings out. There is a young man that suffered a gunshot wound. Our victim, Justice Dunham, if I'm not saying that correctly. He's 17 years old, and he was a student at Woodside High School. Officers rushed to his aid. They removed some of his clothing. They placed a halo seal, one of the things that our police foundation, police department purchased. It's like a packing agent for a wound, and they immediately rendered aid and CPR. I saw some of those officers' faces. I know it touched a lot of people, especially our school resource officers who work with our young people every day. We had some very heartfelt conversations this morning. Regrettably, Justice succumbed to his injuries. The time of the call was at 8:42 p.m. in the middle of the parking lot facing Riverview Park, right there in front of Minchville High School. Chief Grinstead was there, other officers. We did have some witness information. An individual was detained was transported here to police headquarters where he was interviewed. As a result of that interview and conversations with the Commonwealth Attorney well into the early in the morning, today, early this morning, around 3:30, Damari Batten, B-A-T-T-E-N, an 18-year-old at Warwick High School, was arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and a firearm on school property. That result, that arrest, is a direct result of the quick response by the officers, information that this community came forward and provided, even students that were in the parking lot. And then the work from the detectives, what they could collect from technology, from forensics, and the information that they received from people at the scene. And I know, like I said earlier, a lot of them have not gone home. They've been here through the night. Family members showed up. It was kind of chaotic with what had happened with the large amount. We had school representatives and police working together to usher people out. We had several people still in the school. We wanted to make sure, we had the crime scene. We always start bigger and shrink it, but we wanted to make sure we preserved evidence. That's important for our case. We did recover a firearm, and we also recovered 2 other firearms. So I'm not going to go much further into that. I did have a conversation with Mr. Gwynn this morning, but we know that there were 3 firearms, one used by our suspect, and the other 2 were in the vehicle that our victim arrived in. And I can't go much more into that, but I think it's important that we're open and transparent of what we have at this point. I cannot thank the officers enough that responded. And I'll tell you who else impressed me, and Val Young brought it up to me this morning, were the students. That is a chaotic scene. It could have gone a very different way. The students respected what the officers asked them. They moved to different areas. They were able to give us space so we could render aid. They worked with us on meeting with their families. You can understand there were certainly some parents that were concerned. Dr. Parker, Rashard Wright, several members of the school board responded. Councilman Harris was there with us. We went into a smaller gym and kind of talked about what our plan would be. At that point, it was to preserve the crime scene and process what we had. It was to get family members in their vehicles or to their vehicles and out of the parking lot so they could go home without disturbing any evidence. And then, of course, from Captain Petrosky and his team to process the crime scene along with forensics and collect the evidence and then deal with our families. I'd be remiss if I did not say that my heart goes out to both families, especially Justice's family and their loss. Like I said, I believe it was either the lead detective that made contact with him this morning to let him know that an arrest had been made. And I know that doesn't bring justice back, but it does allow for some closure. So there's still a lot of things to do. Interest that I have is, where did those firearms come from? Why were they there? What was the argument about inside? Going over video footage. We spent a lot of investment. Myself and Assistant City Manager Alan Archer talk a lot about technology and the advances it has. We spent a lot of money, a lot of funding on that to help us with these cases. I believe it played a role in the quick arrest. In a matter of 2 hours, the individual was in custody, and then through the interviews, he was later charged after conferring with the Commonwealth Attorney. The message I shared with our commissioners this morning, our representatives from every high school, that I care about them, that I know this affects them. I saw it in their faces and some of the reaction that they had, and that we have to work and do better on all fronts. At home, in our neighborhoods, our communities, our police department. We have to do better. The things we see and hear, even if it's rumored, to report it so we can act on it. I'll tell you what, I'm going to step aside. I'm going to ask Mayor Price to come forward, and then if there's some questions, we'll deal with those jointly, but I want to give the mayor, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Chief. First thing I want to do is just give my condolences to both families as well, whose lives have been permanently altered, especially this time of the year. I just can't imagine the families having to go through what they're currently going through. I guess the next thing I want to say is, I've been mayor 11 years now, and this never gets easy. Having to do this once is one too many times. This is not just a problem in Newport News, not just a problem in our region, but a problem in our country. Quite frankly, in my opinion, there are just too many guns. Access to them is too easy, and as a country and as a society, we won't do what is necessary to keep not only our children safe, but our own families safe. Something has to be done. What will it take? Even when a congressman can get shot, we still won't change the laws. I'm on various committees, locally, regionally, and nationally, about gun violence. We try and bring in best practices. We try and do resources. We've given over $9 million to the city since 2014 about youth and gang violence. Money isn't going to solve the problem. The police department is not going to solve this problem. Our schools are not going to solve this problem. Every one of us has to look in the mirror and say, not only what can we as government do, but what can I do individually? When will this stop? When will we stop meeting like this and having condolences to the families, but it goes on and on and on? And this is painful. It's painful to the police officers who witnessed this, who were there, to the students who are there, who probably don't feel safe now going to school. I'm just at a loss. But I do know that at some point we will have to do something. We will come to grips with this as a country. And at some point, we will have the courage, I think, as a society to deal with this issue. Gun violence is out of control, period. Period. It's just out of control. When it's easier to get a gun than a pack of cigarettes. 3 guns. 3 guns at the scene. It could have been a whole lot worse. Thank God it wasn't. Parents, we have to, and I'm not saying in this instance they were at fault. We don't know yet. But parents are going to have to be responsible for our children, their easy access to guns. It's now a law, and you're seeing it nationally. Parents are being accused of negligence when guns are available to them. Our legislatures are trying. We are trying. As a division, as a school, as a society. But it's got to be up to each one of us, I think, to make this cycle of insanity stop. So I'm going to open it back up in case you have some technical questions that the chief can answer, and any of me, let me know.
Chief, can you reconfirm for us, was Justice Dunham 17 years old? Was he involved in the altercations inside the gym and outside at the car?
Yes.
He was involved in both.
Yes.
Of those. And Damani Batten has been taken into custody. Can you confirm the spelling of his first name? And he did go to Warwick High School. Is that correct?
That's correct. He is 18 years old. Spelling is Damari Batten. He does go to Warwick High School, and I should have mentioned the great relationship that we have with our Hampton, our neighbors next door. I did talk to Chief Talbot last night and again this morning. Just making sure was, our number one priority is always going to be our youth, And we just talked, to make sure that, did we have anything that was related whatsoever? It doesn't appear to anything related to what we had happen here, or anything into Hampton,
Can
but
you-
we did have a conversation this
Can you
morning.
tell us anything more, what more can you tell us about Justice Dunham, 17 years old, school?
Out of respect for his family, I'm not going to go any further into either one of those two young men. Like I said, we had a conversation with his father last night and again this morning. There's a lot of information that we still need to investigate. I want to look at comments, social media posts, a lot more video footage. Schools have been very, very gracious to allow us to have access to those things. And that, matter of fact, before we even came down here, that was still going on. So, like I said, there's a lot, we know what happened and we know who did it. For me is why. And that's going to take a little bit. And we've already had some phone calls come in, some information that we're following up on, some technology things that we'll be looking at, and what residents are saying. We did have a couple witnesses that were very, very cooperative last night and greatly helped in the investigation.
Chief, obviously there's a lot of parents that are concerned as to what's happening not only at Menchville last night, but Heritage High just a few months back. I mean, what can you say about this with the gun situation and the fact that our young kids have got their hands on a gun and they've got them on school property or inside school property?
So I want to be, that is one of the reasons that myself, Dr. Parker, Rashad Wright, the mayor and I and the city manager talked last night and this morning. I believe it is important. I know, we're not even 24 hours in. We don't have all the information, but I want it to be as open and transparent as we can to our community of what we did have, what we do know, that there's not someone running around on the loose at this point. The individual involved in this situation is in custody. Now, I think the mayor addressed very, very clearly about the concerns with firearms. We just saw a shooting, I believe it was in Michigan, where several individuals were shot in a school shooting. We had the situation in Heritage. We had the situation last night at Menchville. There are a lot of firearms in our communities, and there are a lot of access to them. I look at the number of firearms that we've removed from our communities. Usually at the end of the year, the first month of January of next year, we do a press conference, and I'll share with you the number of firearms that we're taking. But I'm telling you, it's right around 800 firearms that we've removed from the streets illegally this year. 800 firearms. That's this year. I think last year we were at 1,000. There are a lot of firearms in circulation. There are a lot of firearms that get passed around back and forth. We have some of the best technology to track that. We invested early on. Myself and Mr. Archer were talking just last week. We have a NIBIN system here that's also at the state lab. We invested very early on. We get hits back, ballistics, if you will. We get that back in about 24 to 48 hours as opposed to weeks if we send to the state lab. That is a tremendous asset that we have, and the technology that we have to produce that. But when you ask what would I say to parents, I would say a couple of things. Be involved with what our young people are doing, who they're hanging with, what are they saying online? What do they interact? What pictures are they posting of themselves with what items online? I cannot tell you the number of individuals that we see posting firearms on social media like it's a toy, and it's not. There's 24 students back there that will tell you it's not a toy. So I think we have to be involved. I think we have to look at our laws. I think we have to address gun violence aggressively, but also I think we have to do it smart. There has to be good understanding. One of our partnerships we have is with CNU. They're doing a study here about the individual shootings we have and our homicides in this city, and some of the issues that portray to violence. They're going to be able to categorize that and work with us about how we attack then what is identified. I wish I could tell you that it was happening in one neighborhood, in one location, we could surround all our resources, but it's not. The majority of homicides in our city this year have happened in the north end. That's not what we've seen in the past. I will tell you, we're sitting at about an 82% clearance rate in our homicides. That's huge. The national average is 62.3. That is because of the hard work of detectives, citizens coming forward, and technology that we have. But I think we have to be invested in our young people, in our youth, and who they interact with. What are they doing? What are they saying? Where are they going? I'm not blaming parents, but I think all of us play a role.
You mentioned that you confiscated 3 firearms. Can you talk did they enter the school? Is there metal detectors at Menchville?
I'm not going to get I'm not going to get too much into anything with the school. I can tell you, we don't have any information at this point that says those firearms were inside that school.
Well, a report said that they had metal detectors, and everyone that went into the game went through the metal detectors. Were the guns inside the gym at the time of
We
the
recovered
game?
3 firearms in vehicles in the parking lot of Mitchell High School.
Chief, you mentioned gestures inside of the gymnasium. Can you say if it was gang-related? What do you mean? When you
It's
say-
certainly something that we're looking at. I can't confirm that, but we're not ruling it out. I will tell you, they're upstairs right now going through a lot of footage that the school has helped us have access to. They've been very, very gracious, but we're looking at that. And we do have homicide detectives and gang detectives looking at that information.
And you said, talking about shots fired, I mean, what are we talking about in the parking lot? Was it just one shot fired? Was
That's
it
correct.
multiple?
1 shot was fired, 1 shell casing was recovered.
And you said
Chief,
two.
Captain Petrosky, Chief Crezo, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, 1 shot. 1 shot was fired, 1 shell casing recovered.
And you said 2 of the guns were in the car the victim was in, I guess, with his friends?
That's correct.
How many friends did he have with him?
I don't want to go much more into that because there's still some individuals we want to interview, and I don't want to hurt Mr. Gwynn's case as we move forward and still interviews that the detectives are doing.
But
Well-
Mr. Batten was in the other car, and then the victim was at his car, right?
So the victim was at the victim's vehicle, and Mr. Batten had approached the victim at his vehicle.
And so Batten's on foot, not in his car.
That's correct.
He's out of the car.
That's correct.
And what words were exchanged? Can you tell us
I
that?
cannot.
Can you confirm for us again what was going on inside the gym, as much as you can? I know you've said it once
Sure.
before, but can you give a little bit more detail?
No, I can't because I don't want to taint any information. I know they're going through that footage. I can tell you that from what I understand, 2 individuals on opposite sides and verbal and some gestures back and forth. And then I think some footage shows one individual walking out and then a little bit later the other.
And the gestures you are further investigating as whether they may have been gang related?
I will tell you, I'm not ruling anything out. I don't know if it could have been a particular finger or if it could have, what those gestures are. But I do have detectives looking at those things.
Okay, you're a compassionate man. We know that. We've been to these, and we've seen the compassion, the emotion. Over the weekend, on Saturday, there was a shooting at Aqueduct Drive. Then there was a fatal shooting at Brighton Lane. And then you had a care walk yesterday.
Yes, sir.
If I understand correctly.
Yes, sir.
And then we had the shooting last night.
Yes, sir.
For a compassionate chief, how frustrating is it for you that I have to read this off to you?
Well, you use the word frustrated. I'd probably use a different, more graphic word, but I won't use it here. When I see the hard work that these men and women do day in and day out, if we haven't shared with you, if you don't know it already, that the homicide that occurred the day before on Brighton, there are warrants on file. That individual has been identified. There are felony warrants currently on file as we speak. And we're working with our federal partners and state to locate that individual. But it is frustrating because I think the mayor laid out. He's been mayor here 11 years, and the different strategies that we put forth. We have a great relationship with the Commonwealth Attorney. And you're talking about an 82% clearance rate. We're arresting those individuals that are committing those crimes, but they still happen. That's why we talk about too many firearms. What do we try new? Is there new technology? Is there new strategies? I don't think we can rule anything out. We have to look at our partners that we have. I'll tell you another conversation I had this morning was my friend Rob Coleman with the Boys and Girls Club. Just talking about when are we getting our programs back up and started. And he called just to kind of check on the officers. But I will tell you, Andy, you mentioned the frustration. And you see, when you talk to families that have lost loved ones, and the officers that respond, and I will tell you, there's a couple that we set up aside today that I need to make sure they see a psychologist just to check on them because I care about them. Those SROs work with these kids day in and day out, and they have a tremendous relationship. I shared some of that conversation with school board member Mr. Ely last night as we talked about our passion for youth in this city. But it is frustrating, but I would probably use another word.
Did
Were there
Damani and
SROs?
Justice know each other? To the best of our knowledge, did Damani Batten and Justice Dunham know each other before all this happened?
I don't know enough to give you an exact answer. I think they may have known each other, but I'm not sure how well, and I don't want to go any further than that because I just don't know. They're still trying to unravel a lot of those things. I would imagine the next 24 hours will have a much better, clearer picture from that, but I'm just not sure. I think they know each other, but I'm not sure about what all that would mean.
So Chief, were there SROs on the property last night at
Yes.
the game?
Yes.
How many?
So we had, I believe we had five officers working the basketball game and a sergeant. When Chief Grinstead went there, he is a big Minchville basketball fan. He had been there Friday night as well to the game after we had the tree lighting down at Brooks Crossing, and he saw the large crowd that was there last Friday. Immediately, I was at the city council meeting. He had texted me and said there was a large crowd. He was going to call for some more officers. So he had already done that, probably because of what he saw in the parking lot, how big. He had two different events. So there were other officers that came. I think at some point there were probably 12 to 13 officers, but then once the shooting occurred, there was considerably more than that.
When you say large crowd in a parking lot, are we talking like dozens? Are we talking hundreds of people? I mean, what was going on in that parking lot?
I think they estimated last night there were 11 or 1,200 individuals that may have been around that game. But you have to also remember the parking lot was full, but there were two events. There was a large rival basketball game, right, Woodside and Minchville. But there was also, if I'm correct, a band, a concert, an orchestra. So they had two events going on. So that parking lot was full. And Minchville's a good-sized landmass, but that parking lot was full. I think they had people even parked in the grass, and Chief Grinstead took it to call other officers and let me know that was happening.
We understand that on the PA system, as the game was ending, someone got on and said, we want Woodside to go out this side, and we want Menchville to go out this side. Was that because of the beef that was going on inside, and that they wanted to keep the group separate, and that there was that concern?
Yeah, I don't want to tell you how they announced that. It may just have been because of where the buses were. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to. I'll refer that to the school system to address on what they put out.
Chief was Batten, was he at the scene when we did things?
Yes, he was attended the scene.
Chief, between the gestures and the shooting, were officers given a chance, or did they have a chance to intervene in what happened?
Well, so we definitely intervened in the shooting once it occurred, but we started moving our officers outside because of, as the game was ending and the large amount of people coming out trying to get in vehicles. Chief Grinstead had positioned correctly. I would have done the same thing to put more officers in that parking lot. The game was letting out, and if anything were going to happen, I would suspect it would take place in the parking lot.
So there was nothing that caused them to kind of move toward these individuals that maybe alerted them before the shooting occurred?
Not that I know of. I believe there was moving officers into the parking lot because it was going to be very, very difficult and challenging to get vehicles out of that parking lot because of how packed it was and people were coming out. Once the scene was locked down and the crime scene tape was put up, so there were some cars that were kind of in the crime scene, right? And there were probably 100 people that were still inside the gym that we needed to get school security, school representatives, and police officers together, right? So we got that good communication and get family by family to their vehicle and out as safely as we could. We had officers posted at the entrances there to keep traffic flowing, but there was a lot of vehicles we had to get out. Now, it did take a while.
Chief, how many people do you think saw the shooting, and what do you say to those individuals that saw something like that at their school or the rival school?
The first thing I said to the young adult police commissioners when I met with them at noon was I apologized to them that this happened in our city. I apologized to them that they had to be around it and see it and that it took place. I think those that saw it and stayed by and were bold enough to talk to detectives and tell them what they saw and what happened. But I will tell you, I'm not going to judge the youth of this city about that incident because we have some of the best talented young people in this city that they care. It is almost Christmas break. And there are 24, 25 students back here hanging out with the police department today because they care about this city.
And I'm sorry, Chief, was Damani Batten, was he in the basketball game to the best of
They
your
were
knowledge?
they were both inside the basketball game.
So we are then saying that Damani then came out, went to his car, got the gun, came back, and
No.
then shot him
No.
allegedly?
No. I'm not going down that road because I'm not going to mess with the investigation. What I'm saying, here's fact.
Is it possible
Here's-
Damani Batten had the gun in the game?
Here's fact. There's an altercation inside the gym verbally, some gestures. That altercation follows outside, and the gunshot rings out. Where that gun came from, produced, all that stuff, I'm not going into that. I'm not going to hurt that case. It's too important. It's too important to that family, to Justice's family, and it's too important to our Commonwealth Attorney. I just can't do that.
But you
I
said-
understand the question, but I just can't do that.
But you said you
That-
arrested the suspect outside
The
of,
suspect was arrested in the parking lot. Several witnesses identified Chief Grinstead made the decision that that individual would be detained. He was later transported to headquarters.
And Chief, just for the record, you don't want to go into the details about whether Batson had the gun inside the game because you don't want it to impede the investigation, is that correct?
There's nothing at this point that I have in any type of information that any of those firearms were inside the building. The firearms were recovered from vehicles.
I just did want to say one thing. I didn't want to end on a note of doom and gloom because, or that we are somehow giving up on the situation. We're in the middle of a community assessment now. CNU is involved. Our community is involved. We're trying to make sure that other funds are going to be available. I think the governor's given the state something like $27 million on gun violence. Our delegation is actively trying to see what we can do to secure some of those funds, utilize those funds for best practices, and continue to work on a problem that has plagued not only our community but society in general. So I just want to leave on that.
Thank you.
Chief, was the suspect arraigned this morning in court? Or does he have a court date, I would imagine, tomorrow if it wasn't this morning?
I would have to confirm with Chief Creswell or Captain Petrosky. I don't want to tell you. I know the arrest was late into this morning, so that may not take place today.
I don't have that information, sir.
Out of all due respect, at this point, we're going to go ahead and close. I want to interact a little bit with people that are here. Again, I want to thank this community. I want to thank the individuals that were at the game last night that assisted us. And I greatly want to thank Mayor Price, City Manager, for the phone calls we had late last night and into this morning. And the school system, Dr. Parker, Rashad Wright, Councilman Harris, School Board Member Mr. Ely. So we had a lot of good conversations last night and this morning. There was a quick arrest within 2 or 3 hours. There was a lot of evidence recovered. But I joined the mayor in that we have got to continue to focus on and make good choices about what our actions are, our associations, and how those can lead to life-changing